Story 4. The Garden of Memory. In the southern lands, where the air is warm and sweet and the sea is never far, there exists a garden. It is not marked on any map. It has no gates, no walls, no guards. And yet, not everyone can find it. Only those who are ready, only those who need it most, seem to stumble upon its paths. I found it in the spring, years ago, when I was traveling between kingdoms on a diplomatic mission. The road I was following branched unexpectedly, and I took a smaller path without thinking, drawn by a scent on the wind. Jasmine, perhaps, or honeysuckle, something sweet and nostalgic, like memories of childhood summers. The path wound through olive groves and past fields of lavender. And then, quite suddenly, I was standing before the garden. It was surrounded by a hedge of wild roses, pink and white and deep crimson, all blooming together in defiance of season. An archway stood in the hedge, woven from living vines, and through it I could see paths of pale stone winding between beds of flowers. I entered and immediately felt a strange sensation, a lightness, as if some burden I hadn't known I was carrying had suddenly eased. The air in the garden was different, softer, filled with the hum of bees and the distant splash of water. The garden was vast, larger than seemed possible from the outside. Each path led to different areas, different themes. I walked slowly, taking it all in. There was a section where white flowers bloomed in profusion. Lilies and roses, gardenias and moonflowers, all giving off a subtle, peaceful fragrance. As I walked through this area, I found myself remembering quiet moments from my life. The morning my daughter was born, a snowfall I watched from a castle window, the feeling of my mother's hand in mine when I was very small. Another section held flowers in brilliant reds and oranges, zinnias and poppies and flame-colored marigolds. Here I remembered moments of passion and intensity, first love, great victories, the pride of achievement, moments when I felt most alive. In a shaded grove, purple and blue flowers grew in cool profusion. Lavender and forget-me-nots, bluebells and violets. Walking among them, I remembered sorrows, losses, partings, the death of my father, friends who had fallen in battle, dreams that had withered before they could bloom. And yet, even these memories did not hurt the way they once had. They were softened somehow, gentled by time and distance. I could look at them without being overwhelmed. I could honor them without being consumed. At the heart of a garden was a fountain. Clear water bubbled up from the center and flowed over carved stone into a wide pool. The stone was ancient, covered in moss and inscriptions in languages I could not read. I sat on the edge of this fountain and looked into the water. And in the water, I saw my own reflection, but not as I was. I saw myself as I had been, a child playing with a wooden sword, a young man, newly knighted, full of pride and certainty, a warrior in his prime, strong and capable. And then, my current self, older, scarred, tired but still standing. Garden of Memory shows us who we have been, a voice said. I looked up. An old gardener stood nearby, leaning on a hoe. She wore a wide-brimmed hat against the sun, and her hands were stained with earth. I didn't hear you approach, I said. Few do, she replied with a kind smile. I tend this garden. I have for longer than I can remember. Welcome, knight. What is this place? I asked. Exactly what it seems, she said. A garden where memories bloom. Each flower here represents a moment, a feeling, an experience that someone has had. When people come here, they tend to gravitate toward the flowers that match their own memories. The garden helps them process what they've experienced, helps them accept and release what needs releasing, helps them treasure what should be treasured. Who planted all these flowers? Everyone who has ever visited, she said. When you walk through the garden, when you remember, you plant seeds without knowing it. They grow into flowers that help the next person, that help you when you return. I spent the whole day in that garden, walking its many paths, sitting by the fountain, touching the soft petals of flowers that sparked memories both sweet and bitter. And with each memory, I felt lighter, as if by acknowledging these moments, by truly seeing them and honoring them, I was able to let them rest properly in the past instead of carrying them constantly in my heart. As evening approached, the gardener found me again. "You can return whenever you need to," she said. "The garden is always here, though the path to it changes. When you need to remember, when you need to process, when you need to let go, you'll find your way back." She gave me a small packet of seeds. "Plant these wherever you feel safe," she said. "They'll grow into forget-me-nots, and they'll remind you that remembering is important, that our memories, all of them, the joyful and the sorrowful, make us who we are." I planted those seeds in the garden of the castle where I lived. They bloomed blue and bright, returning every spring, and sometimes, when I sit among them, I can smell jasmine on the wind. I can hear the fountain bubbling, and I can remember without pain, celebrate without regret. Memory is a strange thing, isn't it? It can haunt us or heal us. It can trap us in the past or teach us for the future. In that garden, I learned that our memories are meant to be like flowers, beautiful to observe, fragrant to recall, but not meant to be clutched so tightly that we crush them. Let them bloom, let them fade, let them return with the seasons. And in the meantime, keep walking forward. Keep living new moments that will one day become the flowers others need to see. But I'm growing philosophical in my old age. Let me tell you instead about something more mysterious. Let me tell you about the lighthouse at the end of the world. Story 5. The lighthouse at the end of the world. On the western coast, where the land finally surrenders to the sea, where cliffs of black rock stand against the endless waves, there is a lighthouse. It stands alone on a promontory that juts out into the ocean like a finger pointing toward infinity. The lighthouse at the end of the world, the locals call it, though whether it marks the end of the world or the beginning of something else, no one can quite say. I came upon it at the end of a very long journey. I had been traveling for months, carrying a message from one king to another, a message of peace that I hoped would prevent a war. The weight of that responsibility had pressed on me with every mile. What if I was too late? What if the message was not enough? What if I failed? By the time I reached the coast, I was exhausted, body and soul utterly spent. I saw the lighthouse in the distance, its beam sweeping across the darkening sky, and I decided to seek shelter there for the night before completing the final leg of my journey. The path to the lighthouse was steep and treacherous, winding down the cliff face and then back up to the promontory. The wind howled around me, carrying the salt spray from the waves that crashed against the rocks far below. But I persisted and finally reached the lighthouse door. I knocked, though I could barely hear the sound over the wind and waves. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened, and a lighthouse keeper stood there, silhouetted against the warm light from within. Come in, he said, ushering me inside quickly. No night for man or beast to be out in. Inside was warm and dry, a single round room with a fire burning in a small stove, and shelves lined with books. A ladder led up to the light chamber above. The keeper was an old man, weathered by years of wind and salt, but his eyes were sharp and kind. He fed me hot tea and bread, and we sat by the stove while a storm raged outside. I told him of my journey, of my mission, of my fears, and he listened, nodding occasionally, but saying little. When I had finished, he rose and gestured for me to follow him up the ladder. We climbed to the light chamber, where the great lens rotated slowly, sending its beam out into the darkness. The view was extraordinary. The sea stretched endlessly in all directions, black and vast under the night sky, and above, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. Do you know what a lighthouse does? The keeper asked. It guides ships, I said. It warns them of danger. It shows them the way to harbor. Yes, he said. But do you know what else it does? I shook my head. It endures, he said simply. Storm after storm, year after year, the lighthouse stands. It does not control the sea. It does not calm the winds. It does not save every ship. But it stands and it shines, and that is enough. He placed a hand on my shoulder. You carry a message of peace, he said, and you fear you might fail. But let me tell you something I've learned in all my years keeping this light. We cannot control outcomes. We cannot guarantee success. All we can do is stand where we are called to stand and shine whatever light we have been given. The rest is not up to us. We stood there for a long time, watching the beam sweep across the darkness, watching the stars turn overhead. And slowly, I felt the weight lifting. Not the responsibility. I would still deliver the message, still do everything in my power to prevent the war. But the crushing fear of failure, the burden of believing it all depended on me alone, that lifted. What if the light goes out? I finally asked. It hasn't in 40 years, the keeper said. I tend it faithfully. I keep the lens clean, the mechanism oiled, the fuel supplied. I do my part, but I cannot make the ships see it. I cannot force them to change course. I can only keep the light burning. When morning came, the storm had passed. The sea was calm, gleaming silver in the dawn light. The keeper walked me to the path and shook my hand. Keep your light burning, knight, he said. Whatever that means for you. Keep it burning. That's all any of us can do. I completed my journey. I delivered the message. And whether it was my doing or not, peace was achieved. The war was averted. But I learned something more important than that success. I learned that I could not carry the weight of the world alone. That I could only do my part, stand in my place, and shine whatever light I had been given. The rest was not up to me. And you know, that's true for all of us, isn't it? We cannot control everything. We cannot fix every problem, prevent every sorrow, save every soul. But we can tend our own light. We can stand where we are called to stand. We can shine in the darkness, however small our flame might seem. And sometimes, on the darkest nights, that's enough. That's more than enough. The fire is burning low now, my friend. The night is deep and quiet. I've told you my stories, shared the wisdom of my travels. And now, it's time to rest. Close your eyes. Let these tales settle into your dreams like leaves falling softly to the ground. Remember the dragon by the silver lake, and that rest is not weakness. Remember the forest of eternal autumn, where time moves gently and peace is always possible. Remember the silent monastery, where the quiet is full of meaning. Remember the garden of memory, where even painful moments can bloom into beauty. And remember the lighthouse at the end of the world, standing faithfully, shining its light into the darkness. You are safe, you are warm, you are exactly where you need to be. Sleep now, traveler. Sleep deeply and well. And when you wake, may you carry some of this peace with you into the day. Good night. Ah, there you are. Come, sit closer to the fire. The night grows cold, and these old bones have seen too many winters to brave it alone. You want to know about my travels? I've walked roads you wouldn't believe existed, fought creatures that would make your blood run cold. But tonight I'll tell you stories that will carry you gently into dreams. Not tales of blood and thunder, mind you. No, I've learned something in my 40 years wearing this armor. The most powerful stories aren't the ones that make your heart race. They're the ones that make it rest. So close your eyes if you wish. Let the fire's warmth hold you. And I'll begin with a tale from the Whispering Woods. Story 1. The Dragon of the Silver Lake. In the easternmost reaches of the kingdom, where the mountains touch the sky and the air grows thin and pure, there lies a lake. The Silver Lake, they call it, though I've heard it named 100 other things by 100 other travelers. The water there, it's like nothing you've ever seen, perfectly still, reflecting the stars so clearly that you cannot tell where the sky ends and the water begins. I first came upon it in my youth, barely 20 winters old, my armor still shining and unscratched. I had been sent to slay a dragon, you see. The villagers in the valley below spoke of a great beast that nested by the lake. They said it had scales of blue and silver, and eyes that glowed like the moon. They said it stole their sheep, their cattle, sometimes even their children. I climbed for 3 days to reach that lake. The path wound through ancient pines that seemed to whisper secrets to one another. The air grew cooler with each step, cleaner, as if I was leaving all the troubles of the world below me. When I finally emerged from the tree line, I saw the lake spreading before me like a mirror of polished silver. And there, on the far shore, I saw the dragon. But it was not what I expected. The dragon lay curled beside the water, its great head resting on its folded wings. Its scales did indeed shimmer blue and silver in the moonlight, each one perfect, like a craftsman had placed them individually. But it was not fierce. It was not terrible. It was tired. I approached slowly, my hand on my sword, but something made me stop. Perhaps it was the way the moonlight fell across the creature's face. Perhaps it was the gentle rise and fall of its breathing. But I did not draw my blade. Instead, I sat, right there on the rocky shore, still 50 paces from the beast. And I waited. Hours passed. The moon climbed higher in the sky. And finally, the dragon's eyes opened. They were indeed bright, luminous, but not with anger. With something else, something like sadness. "You've come to kill me," the dragon said. Its voice was like wind through a canyon, deep and echoing. "I was sent to," I replied, surprising myself with my honesty. "But you haven't drawn your sword." "No," I said, "I haven't." The dragon lifted its head slowly, regarding me with those ancient eyes. "Do you know why I am here, knight?" I shook my head. "I am old," the dragon said simply. "So very old. I have lived 1,000 years, perhaps more. I have forgotten the exact count. I came to this lake to die in peace, in a place of beauty, far from the noise and chaos of the world below. And the sheep, I asked. The cattle? The children? The dragon's laugh was like distant thunder, soft and rolling. I have taken no children. In 1,000 years I have harmed no human child. The sheep, yes, a dragon must eat even at the end. But children? Never. We talked through the night, that dragon and I. It told me of ages past, of kingdoms that had risen and fallen, of heroes whose names are now forgotten, of loves and losses that spanned centuries. And as it spoke, I felt something strange happening. I felt peaceful. The dragon's voice, deep and ancient, seemed to carry away all my fears, all my doubts. The weight of my armor felt lighter. The burden of being a knight, of always being strong, always being brave, seemed to lift like morning mist. When dawn broke across the silver lake, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, the dragon stood. Its great wings unfolded, each membrane translucent in the early light. I will leave this place, it said. Go higher into the mountains where no villagers dwell. Let them think you slew me if you wish. Take one of my scales as proof. And before I could protest, it plucked a single scale from its chest and placed it in my hand. It was warm, and it glowed with an inner light. But I will give you something else, the dragon said, a gift for showing an old creature kindness in its final days. Whenever you cannot sleep, whenever the weight of the world grows too heavy, hold that scale and remember this night. Remember that even dragons grow weary. That rest is not weakness. That sometimes the bravest thing a warrior can do is simply be still. And with that, the dragon launched itself into the air, its wings creating great gusts that rippled across the silver lake. I watched it fly higher and higher until it was just a speck against the morning sky, and then it was gone. I still have that scale, you know. It's in my pack, wrapped in soft cloth. Sometimes, on nights like this, I take it out and hold it, and I remember the dragon's words. That rest is not weakness. That peace is its own kind of strength. But that's enough dragons for now. Let me tell you instead about the Forest of Eternal Autumn. Story 2. The Forest of Eternal Autumn. There is a forest, 3 weeks' ride to the west, where it is always autumn. Not the harsh autumn of dying things, but the gentle autumn of harvest and golden light. The leaves there never fall, but they glow in shades of amber and crimson and gold, as if each tree holds the sunset within its branches. I discovered it by accident, as most wonderful things are discovered. I had been tracking a band of thieves who had stolen from a monastery. Good brothers, those monks. They kept bees and made honey that could soothe any wound, any ailment. The thieves had taken 3 jars of it, worth more than gold in the right markets. The trail led me off the main roads, through lesser paths, and finally through a narrow gap between 2 hills I had never noticed before. And when I emerged on the other side, I found myself in that eternal autumn. The light there is different, softer, like the world itself has been dipped in honey. The air smells of wood smoke and cinnamon, of apples ripening on distant trees, of bread baking in ovens you cannot see. Every breath you take in that forest is like coming home after a long journey. I walked for hours, my pursuit of the thieves momentarily forgotten. The trees grew in graceful patterns, their branches arching overhead like the vaulted ceilings of a great cathedral. Beneath my feet, the path was carpeted with soft moss that seemed to glow with its own gentle light. And then I heard singing, It was not like any singing I had heard before, not the rough tavern songs of soldiers, nor the holy hymns of priests. This was something older, something that seemed to come from the earth itself, wordless and pure, rising and falling like breath, like wind, like water over stones. I followed the sound deeper into the forest until I came upon a clearing. And there, in the center of that clearing, stood a tree unlike any other. It was vast, ancient beyond measure. Its trunk was wider than 10 men standing with arms outstretched. Its branches reached so high they seemed to touch the clouds. And hanging from those branches were lanterns, hundreds of them, thousands, each one glowing with a soft, warm light. Beneath the tree sat an old woman. Her hair was white as fresh snow, her face lined with more years than I could count. She sat at a spinning wheel, drawing out thread that glimmered like moonlight on water. And she was the one singing. She looked up as I approached, and her eyes, they were the color of amber, warm and knowing. "Welcome, knight," she said, her voice creaking like old wood but kind. "You've traveled far to find this place." "I wasn't looking for it," I admitted. "I was tracking thieves." "Ah," she said, nodding slowly. "And yet here you are. The forest has a way of calling those who need it most. Sit, rest. Your thieves can wait. They will not leave this forest without paying their debt." So I sat, right there on the soft moss, my back against that ancient tree. And as the old woman spun her thread and sang her wordless song, I felt something I had not felt in years. I felt safe, not the safety of castle walls or a strong sword arm, but the deep, bone-tired safety of knowing, truly knowing, that in this moment nothing could harm me, that I could let down my guard, that I could simply exist without purpose or duty or obligation. "What is this place?" I asked her. "It is a pause," she said simply, her wheel spinning, a breath between one moment and the next. The world outside moves so quickly, doesn't it? Always rushing, always striving, always fighting and fleeing and fearing. But here, time moves differently. Here, you can rest. "And the lanterns?" I gestured up to the thousands of lights hanging in the branches above. "Each one is a dream," she said. "When people sleep, truly sleep, peacefully and deeply, their dreams float up like dandelion seeds on the wind. Some of them find their way here. I catch them, place them in lanterns and hang them in the tree. They light the forest. They remind us that even in darkness, there is always light, always hope, always the promise of morning." I stayed beneath that tree for what felt like hours, though in that forest I could not be sure. Time moved strangely there, stretching and compressing like honey dripping from a spoon. The old woman told me stories as she spun, stories of the forest, of the creatures that lived there, of the travelers who had found their way to this clearing over the centuries. She told me of a queen who came, disguised as a peasant, fleeing an arranged marriage. She slept beneath the tree for 3 days and 3 nights. And when she woke, she knew her own heart well enough to rule a kingdom. She told me of a soldier who arrived with wounds both visible and hidden. He stayed for a week, helping tend the forest, watering the roots of the great tree with his tears, and left whole in ways no healer could have managed. She told me of children who wandered in while playing, of merchants who stumbled through while lost, of priests and poets and painters, all of whom found exactly what they needed in the eternal autumn light. "What about the thieves?" I finally asked. remembering why I had come. The old woman smiled. "They are sleeping," she said, pointing to a spot beneath a nearby oak. And there they were, the three thieves, curled up like children, the stolen jars of honey sitting unopened beside them. "They will sleep until they dream of the bees they stole from," she said, "until they understand the work and love that went into creating what they took so carelessly. When they wake, they will return the honey themselves. The forest teaches in its own way." When I finally rose to leave, the old woman gave me a small gift. An acorn from the great tree, polished smooth and warm in my palm. "Plant this wherever you find yourself unable to rest," she said. "It will not grow into a tree, but it will remind you that peace is always possible. That autumn, with its gentle light and its promise of harvest, is not just a season, it is a state of being." I left that forest as the sun was setting. Though whether it was the same day I entered, I could not say. The thieves followed me, docile and quiet, carrying their stolen honey back to the monastery. And in my pocket, I carried the acorn, warm against my side. I still have it, you know. That acorn. I've held it on battlefields and in throne rooms, in dungeons and on mountain peaks. And every time I do, I smell cinnamon and wood smoke. I see golden light filtering through amber leaves. And I remember that peace is always possible if we only know where to look for it. But let me tell you now of a different journey. Let me tell you about the Silent Monastery. Story 3. The Silent Monastery. High in the northern mountains, where the snow never fully melts and the wind carries voices from distant peaks, there stands a monastery. The monks who live there have taken a vow of silence. Not a temporary silence, not a silence broken by prayer or song. Complete silence. They have not spoken in years. Some have not spoken in decades. I came upon this place during a winter journey, when a storm caught me unprepared in the high passes. The snow fell so thick I could barely see my hand in front of my face. My horse stumbled, nearly threw me, and I knew that if I did not find shelter soon, the mountain would claim both of us. Through the whiteout, I saw light, faint orange like a candle in a window. I urged my horse toward it, and slowly the shape of buildings emerged from the snow. Stone walls, steep roofs designed to shed the heavy winter burden, and a gate blessedly open. I led my horse into the courtyard, and a monk appeared, seemingly from nowhere. He was old, his beard long and white, his face weathered like the mountain stone. He said nothing, but gestured for me to follow. He led my horse to a stable where other animals stood, warm and well-fed. Then he led me to the monastery proper. Inside, it was warm, blessedly, wonderfully warm. A fire burned in a great hearth, and around it sat perhaps 24 other monks, all engaged in quiet activities. Some were reading, some were carving wood, some were simply sitting, their hands folded, their eyes closed in meditation. None of them spoke. None of them made any sound beyond the necessary sounds of living. The scrape of a chair, the rustle of turning pages, the soft whisper of breath. The old monk brought me food, simple fare, bread and cheese and a thin soup that tasted of vegetables and herbs. But it was hot and filling, and I ate gratefully. Then he showed me to a small cell where I could sleep. A narrow bed, a single blanket, a window that looked out on the snow-covered courtyard. Nothing more. I lay down, intending to sleep immediately, exhausted from the day's journey. But sleep would not come. My mind, so used to the noise of the world, the constant chatter and clatter of human activity, could not adjust to the silence. It was too profound, too complete. Every small sound I made seemed deafening in contrast. So I rose and walked back to the common room, where the monks sat by the fire. I took a seat among them and simply watched. They welcomed me with nods and small smiles, but no words. And slowly, as the hours passed, I began to understand something profound. The silence was not empty, it was full. In the absence of words, I became aware of everything else. The quality of the firelight as it danced across the stone walls, the specific texture of each monk's breathing, the subtle shifts in posture as someone adjusted their seat or turned a page, the presence of each person in the room, distinct and real, without need for introduction or explanation. One of the younger monks was working on a carving. I watched his hands, careful and precise, as he coaxed the shape of a bird from a piece of pine. He worked slowly, with complete attention, as if this carving was the only thing in the world that mattered. And perhaps, in that moment, it was. Another monk sat in meditation, so still he barely seemed to breathe, but his face was peaceful, serene, like a lake without ripples. I found myself trying to match my breathing to his, to find that same stillness within myself, and gradually, I did. The storm outside raged for 3 days. 3 days in which I could not leave, could not continue my journey. 3 days of silence. At first it was difficult. I wanted to speak, to ask questions, to fill the quiet with sound. But the monks were patient. They communicated through gestures, through expressions, through simple presence. And I learned their language. A hand on the shoulder meant welcome, meant friendship. A bow meant respect. A smile meant joy. And silence meant so many things. Contemplation, peace, understanding, acceptance. On the second day, I helped in the kitchen. We prepared meals together, the monks and I working in perfect coordination without a single word spoken. I learned to anticipate needs, to read intention in the angle of a glance, or the gesture of a hand. It was like a dance, intricate and beautiful. On the third day, I sat in the chapel. It was a simple room, bare stone and wooden benches, a single window through which light streamed in a pillar of gold. I sat there for hours thinking of nothing, thinking of everything. And in that silence, I heard things I had never heard before. I heard the voice of my own heart, speaking truths I had long ignored. I heard the questions I had been too busy to ask. I heard the answers I had been too loud to receive. I understood in that chapel that I had been running for years, running from one quest to another, one battle to the next, never stopping, never resting, because I was afraid of what I might discover if I was still and quiet enough to listen. When the storm finally broke, the abbot, the eldest of the monks, came to see me off. He pressed something into my hand, a small stone, perfectly smooth, cool to the touch. And then he did something I did not expect. He spoke. His voice was rough from disuse, barely more than a whisper, but his words were clear. The silence is always there, he said. Beneath the noise, beneath the chaos, beneath the endless stream of words and wants and worries. The silence is always there, waiting. You need only stop long enough to hear it. Those were the only words I heard in 3 days. And they were enough. I left that monastery with the smooth stone in my pocket and a new understanding in my heart. That sometimes the most important thing we can do is nothing. That sometimes the most profound thing we can say is nothing. That in silence, we find the space to hear what truly matters. I still have that stone. Sometimes I hold it and remember those 3 days. I remember the peace of the silent monastery, the fullness of the quiet, the profound communication that needs no words. And sometimes, on nights like this, I stop talking for a moment. I let the silence settle, and I listen. But there are more tales to tell tonight. Let me speak now of the Garden of Memory.